content, guidance, and commentary around entrepreneurship is shaped by contexts that are not universal. 2 years ago, I started my company after many years working in the corporate world. And one of the things I have reflected on a lot since then is how easy it is before you do this yourself to underestimate how different the experience really is. So I wanted to share some lessons learned. First of all, let me say that I had responsibility before, and a lot of it. I had pressure, demanding environments, expectations, difficult decisions. So I didn't come into this thinking work was supposed to be easy. That was never the issue. Having said that, when you're part of a bigger structure, even a very demanding one, there is still a system around you. There are layers, hierarchy, processes. There is a kind of shared weight. You may carry a great deal, but you're not carrying the whole thing alone. When it's your own company, that changes completely. Every decision has a different texture when it's just yours. Not because the decision itself is necessarily always bigger, but because there is nowhere for it to go. If things go well, that's on you and congratulations, that's one thing. But if things go badly, that's also yours. If you take a risk, you live with it. If you hesitate, you live with that too. And I think that has probably one of the biggest lessons for me. Entrepreneurship is often presented as freedom, and of course there is freedom in it, but the part people speak less honestly about is that freedom and responsibility are tied together. You don't get one without the other. There's also loneliness in it. You can have a team around you. You can have people you trust, supporters, friends, family, clients, partners, and still there are moments where the weight of decision making is yours in a very solitary way. There is no one coming in above you to steady the situation, no one to say, this is the decision, I will carry it from here. You're the one who has to decide, even when you're tired, even when you don't have complete certainty, and even when the consequences matter. People also don't talk enough about the way stress changes shape. They imagine that stress only comes when there is too much happening, but that's not really how it works. When you have a lot of work, you feel stretched, exhausted, pulled in too many directions. But when things are quieter than you want, you feel a different kind of pressure. You start thinking ahead, questioning, calculating whether enough is moving, whether you should be doing more, whether you're missing something. So the stress doesn't disappear, it just changes form. And I think that's one of the realities people only understand when they live it. At the same time, and this is important, it's also deeply rewarding. And I don't say that lightly. There is something very meaningful about building something and watching it become real in the world. Building a team, seeing people grow with you, feeling that clients have chosen to trust you, especially when they had other options, often larger and more established ones. That trust means a lot because it's earned in a very direct way. And there's also a different kind of satisfaction in knowing that what you're building reflects your judgment, your standards, your choices, your way of seeing things. That doesn't make it easier, but it makes it meaningful. On a personal level, in these 2 years, I've become much more careful about where I place my energy. Because there are always external events going on. Things happening around you, things that affect the market, affect your thinking, your mood, your plans. Of course they affect you, but I've learned that you cannot spend your days feeding anxiety over things you cannot control. You cannot keep pouring energy into what is outside your hands and still expect to stay clear. You stay aware, you stay informed, but you protect your focus. Otherwise, you get drained by everything around you and you lose the clarity you need for the things that are actually yours to carry. And maybe that's the part of what this journey changes in you. It makes you more protective of your energy, your time, and your attention. It also teaches you that you have to be able to pick yourself up. Of course, there are moments when things affect you. There is pressure, disappointment, frustration, doubt, exhaustion. You feel all of it. And I don't think the answer is to pretend you are untouched by any of it. I think you have to allow yourself to feel what you're feeling properly, but it has to have an end. It cannot become the emotional climate you keep living in. At some point, you have to draw a line, pick yourself up, and move. You have to give that ending yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. And I think that also changes your tolerance. My tolerance for wasted time is now extremely low. My tolerance for useless noise, unnecessary drama, circular conversations, all the things that consume energy and produce nothing meaningful is now almost non-existent. Maybe it was always low, granted, but in the past, I was more willing to put up with it. I stayed around it longer than I should have. And I don't do that anymore. Now I distance myself much faster. Not because I've become cold, but because I understand the cost much better. When you're building something, nonsense, unfortunately, is expensive. Noise is expensive. Drama is expensive. It takes focus, energy, clarity, peace of mind. And those are not things you can afford to waste carelessly. I've also learned something else that I think matters, especially in my part of the world. A lot of the content, guidance, and commentary around entrepreneurship is shaped by contexts that are not universal. Much of it comes from larger markets and more transactional environments. And some of it is useful, of course, but some of it simply doesn't translate. If you are operating in a small market, especially one that is heavily relationship-based, with long sales cycles and a lot of trust involved, the reality is different. Things take longer. Reputation matters. Visibility matters, and credibility matters even more. And very often you're trying to operate in your local market while also realizing quite early that you may need to look outward because the market around you is too small to contain your ambition. That creates a particular kind of tension. You're trying to build something solid where you are while also thinking beyond it almost from the get-go. And I don't think enough advice reflects that reality honestly. There is also the inner side of all this, which for me included imposter syndrome. And I think it's important to say that openly because many people experience it and assume they are the only ones. My own background is not the obvious stereotype people might expect. I came from social sciences, and yet for years I've worked across technology, innovation, transformation, and business. And although I know what I bring and I know the value of that combination, that doesn't mean the doubt never appears. It does. There are moments where you question whether you fit the image people have in their minds of who belongs in certain rooms or who has the right to lead in certain spaces. What I've learned is that the non-traditional path can feel like a disadvantage if you look at it through the wrong lens. But very often, it's also the reason you see things differently, ask better questions, connect worlds that other people keep separate. And in the long run, that can become one of your real strengths. So after 2 years, what would I say? I would say entrepreneurship reveals a lot. It reveals your appetite for uncertainty and adrenaline. It reveals how you deal with responsibility when there is no shield around you. It reveals your relationship with doubt, stress, pressure, chaos, and visibility and risk. It shows you very quickly whether you like the idea of building something or whether you can actually stay with the reality of it when it becomes messy, slow, and demanding. And despite all of that, yes, I would recommend it. I would recommend it to someone who can tolerate uncertainty, to someone who can keep moving without constant reassurance, to someone who understands that there may be nobody coming to rescue the situation, and that is precisely why this journey changes you. Because that's the truth of it. It's difficult, it's exposing, sometimes exhausting, but it's also one of the clearest ways to find out what you are capable of carrying and what kind of person you become when the responsibility is fully your own.